Oh, sure. You ready to go? Yeah? Okay. So instead of doing a full Chanukah Yom Iyun, the Yeshiva decided this year to take one shir during the lunch slot every day, kind of have something about Chanukah every day at lunch. So Mitzvah Shem will start today. And this is kind of part two to whoever was at Kiddush yesterday, what we spoke about yesterday with Yosef. I think I named the Chabura what Yosef Atzadik taught us about the Neiros Chanukah. What I'd like to do is go through a little bit of the story of Yosef that Dafka we read yesterday, and use that to ask rather simple questions, get a certain mahalik maybe in the beginning of the story, and once we have kind of a clear-cut idea of Yosef in Parshas Vayeshev, move over to Chanukah and see what we could really learn about the comparison and maybe why the story of Yosef has to fall out now. The Shla teaches us that the Parshios of the year fall out Dafka when you need them to. Meaning, in other words, there's something about the Parshios of Yosef Atzadik that fall out during Chanukah time for a certain reason. It's not just that they are now, it's not just that they happen to, but the Shla would say that there's something about what we learn in Yosef, learn from Yosef Atzadik and the story with the Shvatim, that we need to apply now. That's not just in terms of Chanukah, but maybe in terms of this time of year as we get into the darker part of the winter, or this part of Zman as we kind of near the halfway point. So Mitzvah Shem, that's where we're going to start with Yosef. Who was at the Kiddush yesterday? Okay, good. So it'll be new for most of you. I think often we try to find the big question that gives us the biggest Kiddush, and we try to hit a home run with a Dvar Torah or with an idea that no one's ever heard. And as good as that is and positive that could be, it kind of causes us to lose sight of maybe the more Pashut questions, the more Pashut answers. Maybe if I was to ask someone, what was the goal of the Ketonis Pasim? It's a good question, but maybe it's a little bit more of a Pashut question that we don't touch upon as much in Yeshiva, because maybe we're kind of looking at the bigger picture, which is a very good thing. But I'd like to ask maybe simpler questions at the beginning of Vayeshev and try to get us a mahalach there. When we start, the Lashon we're introduced to with Yosef, not just who he is, but what he does is very interesting already. We see Ben Shvas Reshana, he's 17, Hayaroas Achav Batzon. What does that mean? He was the shepherd of his brothers. Already, shepherd of his brothers. What we could say is shepherd of his brothers means what? We know that he's the Ben Skunim and kind of greater than all the other brothers, at least in the eyes of Yaakov. Maybe he was Ki'ilu, the shepherd, but already shepherd's a very interesting lashon. And then we see, even though he's Yosef etibatzam ra'a alaviyam, even though he brings forth to Yaakov all the bad things his brothers are doing, we still see what? Still see that Yaakov loves him to call banav ki ben skunim hu. He's the ben skunim. Not going to get into what that is this second, but he is the ben skunim. And because of that, what does he give? Vasalo ketonis pasim. There's almost a schar he gets for what he's doing. Now, at first glance, you see who he is. You see who Yosef is. He seems like this maybe a bit more arrogant kid. He's 17, we have to remember, who's kind of going around being bringing that which the brothers do poorly. And kind of that's the idea. And he's doing these things, almost like a tattletale in a way. And Yaakov says, here's your ketonis pasim. What's pshat? And more than that, we see after, once he starts sharing the dreams, he doesn't just say what the dreams are, but he says, Shibunara cholom hazeh shechalamti. The brothers are already not on his good side, and he's not on their good side. And so he doesn't just say what the chalom is. He says, no, listen up. I got something to say. Now, if you're already beating your brothers down, and you're already tattletaling on them, and you're showing off the ketonis pasim a little bit, and now you say, no, I'm going to add something to the list. It doesn't seem very favorable. It doesn't seem like something very positive. So what does Yaakov do? Yaakov comes back and says, Ma chalom hazeh shechalamta. And then we say, Vayigarbo aviv. Yaakov's like, what's this dream? What are you sharing this dream for? We don't have to hear this dream. And you think, Yaakov, you're the Isha Chalomos. You're the original Isha Chalomos. Think about the Chalomos you had. You're minimizing the dreams Yosef's having. If anything, it should be the opposite. You also told Yosef that he should be the one in charge, Kiviyachol. So what are you doing minimizing his dreams? And if so, if Yaakov is trying to minimize these dreams of Yosef, why is it then we say, V'aviv shamar sadavar? What was he shomer? What did he keep to himself after he told Yosef not to share the dreams? Ad kam the questions we have on Yosef. And I think if we asked 4 questions, we could take the Rav Heller approach. 4 questions means we have to answer questions with the Sforno. I don't know if you guys are at that point yet. His favorite Perish Torah is the Sforno. Good ideas to have. Before we get to that, maybe a couple more questions now. We see the Midrash learns, Chazal learned 2 things from this, how Yaakov treats Yosef compared to the other Shvatim. Firstly, we say, if you look in Breshis Rabbah, we say, Tzarech Adam shelo l'shanus ben mibanav. Why? Because Yaakov separated Yosef from his children, and look what happened. Look what they did, not just to him, but how it allowed Am Yisrael to end up in Chutz La'aretz, how we ended up in Avdus in Mitzrayim. And that's as well what we say in Shabbos Yudam and Beis. We say, Al Yishen Adam B'no Bein Banim. A man should not differentiate one son from the others. Why? Because we see, B'Shebishvil Mishkal Shnei Slaim Me'ela Shenatan Yaakov LeYosef Yoter Mishabenav. What Yosef was given more from Yaakov than any other son. God needs Kanubo Achav. His brothers became jealous of him. When he's Gaga Odava V'Yadu Avaseinu Mitzrayim. And this allowed and eventually caused all of Am Yisrael to go down to Mitzrayim. So what do we say? Don't favor one son over the others. Okay, Yaakov's a bright man. Well, then why did he? Or at least, it appears in the Pshat, why does it appear that he favored Yosef from all the other sons? If you flip the page, worked out well. The Sforno on the top of the next page is going to help us break that down a little bit. Let's go through the questions we asked and see how the Sforno gives us maybe a picture of Yosef we have not seen yet. Hayaroa esachav batzon. Hayamanhig umora esam b'malachas mare atzon. He was their leader. Keep going, and we'll put it all together in a sec. What's the goal of the Ketonis Pasim? Vasala Ketonis Pasim. Here's the really real kicker of the Sforno. La'os sheyehu hamanig babayis ubasadeh. To show that Yosef is the leader at home and in the field. What does that mean, that show he's the leader at home in the field? Midrash teaches if he's called the Ben Zkunim. Why is he called the Ben Zkunim? Midrash gives a couple answers, but one is what? Yaakov decided to give over the Masorah to Yosef. Everything he learned in Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever from all his sons decided to go through Yosef. Now who was Yosef then? Yosef was the one that while the brothers went out with the son, he was sitting there staggering with his father, learning with his father. Until what? Until eventually sometimes Yosef had to leave home. What's the difference between Yosef and his brothers? The brothers are home. You think they're sitting at Yaakov's table doing what we learn in the Midrash as well, and Rashi brings down that they did outside? You think that's what they were doing? They were the same type of person inside the house as they were outside the home? Absolutely not. What does the Ketonis Pasim represent then? That Yosef's the manhig b'bayis said he didn't change. The person he was when he sat with Yaakov was the same person when he left. When everyone was around Yaakov's dinner table, they were dressed a certain way, they acted a certain way. When they went out to the tzon, they changed clothing. They were a different person. They weren't the same person inside that they were outside. They changed. Not just in the actions, not just in the chatayim they may have done, but really the clothing as well. So what does Yaakov say? Yosef, look at your brothers. They're not the same inside and outside. And in addition to that, their clothing changes, representing who they were, who they changed to be. So what does he say? Yosef, take this Ketonis Pasim and leave home. Go to your brothers and show them that you don't change. You're the same person inside and outside. You're the manhig b'bayis u'besada. So if so, why does he say then, Shimu nala cholam hazeh asher chalamti? Listen up to this dream. Why? Because Yosef knows he's right. Listen, your stocks are bowing down to mine. The Yerech, the Shems, the Kochavim are bowing down to mine. I'm doing something right. Even the Kochav of Yaakov is also bowing down to me. I must be doing something right. So I'm not just going to say the dream, but listen to me. He's trying to help his brothers out. Listen to what I'm doing correctly. Listen to what you're missing. There's something you're missing here. So then Yaakov comes and says what? What's he saying? Why are you sharing this dream? Yaakov, you should be sharing this dream. Sforno brings down, don't over here, but the Sforno brings down, sometimes when you're right, not everyone else must know that you're right. Yaakov knew the metzias of the relationship between, the reality of the relationship between the Shvatim and Yosef. He said, cool down. Don't go around flaunting. You have the Ketonis Pasim. I see that something's different about you already. There's a limit. Just because you know something's right does not mean the whole world needs to know that you're right. So then why do we say Vaviv Shemar Sadavar? The final Sforno, Shechashav Sheyah HaChalom Amiti. He knew the dreams were true. He knew what the message was, and that's why he knew what Yosef was trying to do with the dreams. Shows brothers, look at my dreams. Look, there's something about me that you guys are missing. It's not just the Ketonis Pasim, but really, my Chalomos are telling me that I'm doing something right. You guys are bowing down to me. It's not the other way around. And Yaakov says, Vaviv Shemar Sadavar. Yeah, he knew they were right. He knew they were right. He was just trying to protect Yosef. So all of a sudden, we have such a different view of who Yosef is. Who is Yosef then? Yosef's not a 17-year-old child going around flaunting himself to his brothers, trying to get himself in trouble. What's he doing? He's trying to respect the kavod of Yaakov. He's taking what he knows, the manhig b'bayis b'sadeh, the leader wherever he is, coming in front of the Shvatim and saying, look, you guys are doing something wrong. I'm trying to help you here. My Ketonis Pasim was I didn't change. Look at your changed clothes. You came out to the fields, you look different. You are different. But I'm telling you what, I'm the same inside and out. When I leave home, I'm not a different person. When I leave home, I'm still the one inside. I'm still Ben Skunim, I'm the Manhi Babayis Ubasadeh. Ad Khan, that's maybe what we see with Yosef. Before we get into how we see that with maybe the story of Chanukah as well, and Sefer Maccabim, how the psukim there really spell it out. If we go back to the beginning, we know the Midrash in Perkei Avos and Perkei Mishnah Gimel tells us, Asar Nisyonos Nisnasa Avram Avinu ve'amad bechulam. Alav Hashem ve'amad bechulam. Why? Why do you have 10 Nisyonos? Le'odia kama chibato shel Avram Avinu alav Hashem. To see how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved him. Now, based on what you know of the 10 Nisyonos, look at the list of the Rambam. What's not here? Which Nisayon should be here in this list? Maybe one of the more obvious ones, and is not in the list that the Rambam brings. Think early on. Kivshan Eish. Kivshan Eish is not brought down by the Rambam. Why? Rav Natzon Tzvi Finkel Zatzal, the Mir Rosh Yeshiva. For those that don't know, he passed away at 67, 13 years ago maybe. He had very intense Parkinson's. There's a picture I'm sure you'll see over the next couple of days of him lighting Neiros Chanukah, but fighting to keep his hand steady so he could be Mekayim the mitzvah. Says, this is a person that when he says it, it's an amazing clip that's worthwhile looking up on YouTube, where he's shaking in his wheelchair, and he says, why doesn't the Rambam include the Kivshan Eish? Because a physical nisayon, a physical test, cannot be compared to a spiritual test. Even though that this was a test, the Kivshan Eish, it's not as difficult and it's not on the same madrega or level as a spiritual nisayon is. That's why the Ram left it out, to show their physical nisayonos in life, their physical tests, and then their spiritual tests. What was the biggest spiritual test that the Chashmonayim faced? Hellenism. They're living in a time where these are, the Rashiva like saying, the first Hezra students. They're the ones learning all day and then went out to fight when they had to fight. They're living in a time where there was no hashba around them. The only inspiration they had was from within. They couldn't have this inspiration felt by anyone else when they left home. It was only when they were in the Beis Midrash. That's where they had to develop themselves to be, and that's where their quote-unquote safe space was. So look at the psukim here. If you look at the second pasuk in Perek Beis in Sefer Maccabim Aleph is Matisyahu's dying tefillah to his sons before they go out and fight. He goes through different members of Tanakh and shows how resilient they were, and the Chashmonayim should be resilient as well. Sefer Maccabim. What does he say in the name of Yosef? Yosef Shamars Mishmeres Hashem Be'etz Tzarato V'hi La'adom Mitzrayim. Yosef was able to hold on to who he was when he left Mitzrayim. By the way, it's not just when he had the Ketonis Pasim. Maybe the best example of who Yosef wasn't in Vayeshev, but maybe at the end of Vayeshev by the end of Vayeshev with Eshes Potifar in the Beis Asurim. Maybe it's with Paro next week. Yosef really doesn't change. Yosef never changes. It's not the Ketonis Pasim. You see, it's really who he was. Tochel Kabar. He wasn't a different person. Now, maybe the most amazing is the third pasuk I have here. Perek Gimel, pasuk Gimel. This is as they're suiting up for battle. The Chashmonayim. The Chashmonayim, again, these people who were only fighting because of who they were inside. They were only fighting because of what they became in the Beis Medrash. No one else was willing to fight for the Jewish values. Why? Because they were losing them. But the Chashmonayim didn't lose who they were when they left. The Chashmonayim were the same people inside as they were outside. Look what they say. This is as they're gearing up, you can say. Vayehi kishinas kegavar chaltzav vayesach elamo becharvo b'kashato. As the Chashmonayim went and took their battle armor, their swords, their shields, vayinachel kavod ugdola le Yaakov. Who was happy to see what the Chashmonayim were doing? Yaakov. Why? Yaakov Avinu saw it with his own son. Yaakov Avinu, who gave the Ketonis Pasim to Yosef, said, be the same inside as you are outside. Take the values you have when you're inside and apply them to your life outside. Don't change. Don't allow the outside world and the hashpah, the inspiration, and the surrounding people and forces that are outside to affect you. So he's happy to see Yosef goes out in the Ketonis Pasim. The Ketonis Pasim represents what? Who he is inside. Who he is in the safe space, in the safe walls of where those values are developed. So why is it Vayinachel Kavod Ugdola Yaakov? They gave this great kavod, and it was an amazing, great thing for Yaakov. It's the same idea. The battle armor of the Chashmonayim was what? Their representation of fighting for values they had inside, not outside. Not because of who they were outside, but because of who they developed to be inside. The Chashmonayim were only fighting a war of Jewish value because their Jewish values were given to them properly. It's not because the Hellenists didn't fight. That's why their numbers were so small. What did they know? They left the base medrash, the Cheshbonaim, and were willing to fight because that's who they were. The battle armor represents, I'm fighting for what I believe, inside, also outside. That's an amazing thing, and maybe that's what we see then. I think this idea is brought out more in Pirkei Avos. In Perek Vav, Mishnah Tet, of the 120 Mishnayos in Pirkei Avos, only one is told over in an agadic way. Only one mamash looks like a story. Look here. Amar Rav Yosef ben Kisma. I was once walking around and I bumped into someone. We said hi to each other. Amari Rebbe, me'ezeh malkum ata? The man looked at him and said, Rebbe, where are you from? Amarti lo me'ir gdola shel chachamim v'shel sofer mani. Be careful. How does he describe where he's from? He doesn't say Florida. He doesn't say Cleveland. He doesn't say Yerushalayim. He doesn't say anywhere. He doesn't say Yavan. What does he say? He describes what the city. What is the city in his eyes? Me'ir gdola shel chachamim v'shel sofrim. I'm from a year of chashiv people. Talmidei chachamim, sofrim. Amar li Rebbe, b'tzoncha shetadori manu b'mkomenu. Why don't you come live with us? Ani eten lecha elef alafim dinari zahav avanim tavos margalios. I'll give you all the money you want. Why don't you just come live with us? You seem like a chashiv guy. We could use you in our community. Amarti lo. Yosef ben Kisma says back to him, Beni, imatan uten li kol kesef zahav avanim tavos margalios shabaolam. Even if you gave me all the money in the world, eini dar elam b'mkom Torah. I would only live in a place of Torah. Ad kan, the Mishnah. The Derech HaChaim. Who's the Derech HaChaim? Derech HaChaim? Not quite? Not quite? You're using Chaim, right? The Maharal. It's the Maharal's Perish on Pirkei Avos. So what do we see here? There's Rav Yosef ben Kisma interaction. Very interesting how he's responding to it. He says, we see from Yosef ben Kisma what? As much as he, if you want to see inside, also just for outside for now in terms of time, Yosef ben Kisma says what? The Maharal explains, Yosef ben Kisma just left the Beis Midrash and he's heading home. And as stark as he was in the Beis Midrash, all of a sudden he leaves. Those values need to be so much stronger when you're outside than inside. Inside, it's easy. Everyone's davening mincha, you daven mincha. Everyone shows up to Seder on time. You hopefully show up to Seder on time. But what do we see here with Yosef ben Kisma? When he leaves the Beis Midrash, kal v'chomer. The values, halachas, kama v'kama, have to be so much stronger, so much implanted in him. He's on the road. Anyone can bump into him. They can ask him any question. And look how he responds. The responses are based on how he developed himself inside. And now we just see it play out outside. And maybe that's what we start seeing with Chanukah. The mitzvah of Chanukah is hadlakas Neiros, but ner ish ubeso. My wife pointed out wisely, there's no other chag that's 100% based inside. Everything is hachanos in there. You're building your sukkah, you're yamim naraim, you're in shul. It's only what? It's only Chanukah that you stay home. Ner ish ubeso. It's a mitzvah for you and your home. But not just that. You have to be able to cheshbonaim a little bit. What do? You take your neiros and you put them where? In the place where there is the most amounts of persume nisa. The lights that I am building inside my home, the lights that I have inside must reflect outside. I don't just light neiros. We see the Chazon Ish brings down other achronim, Rav Davidsal passes like this too. You're supposed to light by your front door. On the left side, on the right side, you walked bein shnei mitzvos. But what if there's no persume mitzvah from my front door? Also in the building here, outside the front door, it's a little hallway. We have a window there that goes out to the rova. The Chazon Ish says, no, you put it by the window. Why? It's about allowing as much light inside being shown outside, as much persuminess as possible. But it has to come from inside. The lights that you're trying to show outside need to come from inside. And even when you put them by your door, they're still by your door. You don't put them in your end of your driveway, end of your lawn. Put them by your door. That's your Rav Kook that we'll speak about outside, speaks about in Einaya, his parish on Gados of Shabbos and Brachos. Anyone in the Rav Tovia share? Right? Right, last year? He says like this, what was the goal of the Yavanim? If you look carefully when we say in Alanisim, Bimei Matzisyahu, we say, Lashkicham Torasecha, Lavira Mechukei Ritzonecha. The goal is not to just stop them from learning, stop them. The goal is to make them forget everything they knew. And the way Rav Kook says it, it was to uproot every essence of the morality of being a Jew. Every value that they had from their learning, from their mitzvos, it was uprooting them. And where is the place those values are instilled most? Bebeso. Rav Kook saying that is their goal. That is what they're trying to do. They're not just trying to remove whatever and have you close up a base medrash for a little bit. They're trying to uproot all the Jewish values you have from your home. So what's Mamela? What's the mitzvah? Ner ish ubeso. Because that's where the stem of the light must come now, after the Avanim, to remember the Nisim, because that's where they will allow you to continue outside your home, valuing and holding on to them. And finally, if you look on the picture I put here, I tried finding it online. Michtav Eliyahu, who's the Michtav Eliyahu? That's very good. England, right? He was in England for a little bit, I think, before he came to Panovich. Look here, it's a piece I saw when I was in the army on the Syrian border. It was like one of those nights. Charlie would know, it was like 10 at night. You realize you haven't opened a safe for most of the day. And I went to the little base midrash they had there in like the rain, and I found this piece, and I use it in probably 50% of the chaboras I give. Look where it says Amnam. Amnam. The piece is called Chinuch Umadrega. Amnam. If Shar La'adam Im Svivato Tovahi, a person who has a good surrounding, Lavo B'derech Zeh Lidei Maisim Gdolim Gam Lidei Tzidkus Mitzuyanes. A person could have a good upbringing and constantly be surrounded by good rebbeim and good people, and be a good person, and do mitzvahs well. L'famim af ad kedei mesiras nefesh. And even you can learn the value of mesiras nefesh from those that are around you. Aval madrega zos biotam madrega michu nechet. What is this level? Nature or nurture? Nurture. The only reason you have these values is from what you learned around you. Question is, who are you really? When you have the level of your chinuch only being that, a level that is taught to you and not defined as who you are, there's only a certain level you can get to. Meaning, someone can come in front of you and say you should start watching Negel Vaser. You should do Netilas Yadayim in the morning. Is that who you are? Is that a mitzvah that you inherently made part of yourself and what you value? Or is it someone said this is what you're supposed to do? Seemingly the latter. It's not as high of a level as when it's part of you. A little more. Madrigato amitis mishakef ba'utam hamasim hanovim mitoch etzem pnimiuto asher sham hu nilcham im yitzro miyuchudim shelo. Where does the true value and the highest value of a person's values come from? From inside. From what you develop on your own. And how do you know when those values are yours? How do we know when everything you take from the yeshiva and your base midrash and your rebbeim, when your chavusas in this farm you learn, and everything you do throughout your day in the yeshiva, how do we know when those values are emistic and are really part of who you are? When you go outside. As long as you're inside, you never know. If all Yosef did was sit inside with his Ketonis Pasim, you wouldn't know if he was a manhig with bias, ubasada. And the Chashmonaim never went out to fight. You never knew if they left the base midrash, would they become Hellenists? Would they lose those values? Was it really part of them or not? And maybe that's what Chanukah is to a certain extent. The mitzvah of Ner Ishu Beso is taking the values I have at home, putting them by the window, the most amounts of pursuing Nisa, and showing that the values I develop inside and the lights that I make figuratively and literally carry on with me outside. They go with me when I leave home. I become the manhig b'bayis ubasada. I have the Yosef effect, the Chashmonaim effect, and the Ner Ishu Beso effect. And what we said at the beginning with the Shlam, maybe now's the perfect time for this to be spoken about. You're gone almost halfway through Choresman. You're coming out, well, we're 40% through almost. And now you have to ask yourself, it's the first test really this coming week, what we call Bein Hazmanim D'Rabbanan. Right? The time of Chanukah that we have Afalo, you go to Elad, Elam Moreh, wherever you're going, home. And it's the time you ask yourself, what? Is this who I am? Did the values I took with me, are they just on the value, like Rav Detzer says, of mechunach? It's something I've learned and been educated to carry on with me, or is it something that is really me? And the only way you could ever really know if it's you is when I go outside. So Mitzvah is Chanukah, as you light Neiros, Dafka by the window, and you see your Mekayim the Mitzvah, Ner Ishu Beso, with the most amounts of pursuing, you need to ask yourself, are the lights that I'm lighting only reflecting inside the home, or do I see them being carried outside? And maybe even when you go outside, try looking at the Neiros. Look at the Neiros of other people and see if those Neiros reflect yours also. Is it just their Neiros you say outside, or Mirz Hashem, yours as well? And the further that correspond carries on, and the further these lights hopefully grow bigger and bigger, you should always ask yourself whether or not Mirz Hashem you're growing into someone who's the manhig b'bayis ubasada. Shkach.